So imagine if your entire identity, everything you thought you were, was built on a simple mistake. This is a story about that. It's about how a single typo on a birth certificate can echo through a lifetime, shaping a person's sense of self and completely rewriting their legacy. It really makes you think about the true weight of a name.
And it all kicks off with these words, spoken by a grandfather in a little coastal village in Thailand. This was a man practically woven from salt and sea. And this idea of a name as an anchor, that becomes the central guiding metaphor for everything that's about to unfold. A name is what's supposed to hold you steady.
And here, you can see the massive contrast at the very heart of this story. On one side, you've got the name he was supposed to have, Thon. It's a Thai name, it means anchor or unyielding, it's all about strength, legacy, the sea. But a simple mishearing gave him Than, a name with Greek roots that means death. You've got the anchor versus the abyss, strength versus otherness, and this huge conflict was born from just a single simple mistake.
And the crazy thing is, the origin of this change was so mundane, you know? It wasn't some grand twist of fate. It was a tired hospital clerk, a noisy waiting room, and an accent that got lost in the shuffle. A quick pen stroke, a signature, and an identity was legally and, you'd think, irrevocably changed before it even had a chance to begin.
So what happens when you have to carry a name that isn't really yours? Well, that clerical error, it casts a long, heavy shadow over his entire childhood.
The fallout from this was immediate and just relentless. His cousins nicknamed him Death Boy. Teachers could never ever get it right, and in American suburbia, it was just one more thing that marked him as different. He described it as feeling like wearing a borrowed coat, too tight across the shoulders. What a perfect metaphor for an identity that just never quite fit. It was a constant, nagging reminder that he was adrift, unmoored from who he was always supposed to be.
You know, an identity built on such a fragile foundation can only take so much pressure before it starts to crack. And for him, that pressure led to a complete unraveling, and it was sparked by two deeply traumatic events.
And just look at how close together these are. It's brutal. At 17, he's crushed by the weight of his father's expectations and he attempts suicide. He survives, but he's scarred. Then, just a year later, at 18, a horrific car crash brings him face to face with death all over again. 2 brushes with the abyss in the span of about a year.
Now this is crucial. He didn't see these as just near-death experiences. He described them as a splintering. His soul didn't just break, it fractured into all these different pieces. And this violent splintering forced him to confront absolutely everything: his name, his family, his entire sense of self.
Which brings us to a really fundamental question, one that he had to answer for himself. When you feel like you've been shattered into 1,000 pieces, where do you even begin to rebuild?
Well, his answer was to start right at the source of the fracture itself. He began the conscious, deliberate act of reclaiming the name he was always meant to have.
And wow, what a journey that was. It all started with a blunt comment from a bookstore owner that was kind of the last straw. From there, it was an all-out bureaucratic war, digging up documents, filing affidavits, just fighting through the whole maze of Social Security. And it all culminated in a courtroom, where a judge's gavel finally officially put an end to Van and gave life to Thon. But, you know, a legal change is one thing. Healing your soul is something else entirely. Now that he was legally Thon, he turned inward. He began to explore all those splinters of his trauma through a pretty unconventional path, guided psychedelic experiences, really trying to understand the pieces of himself that had been left behind.
And from that really deep journey, he gained this powerful insight. He realized that trauma doesn't just destroy. Fractures can actually fertilize new growth. We don't just break, we can branch out from the damage, finding new strength in the rubble. It's just a profound reframing of what it means to heal.
So, just when he thought he'd finally pieced himself back together, the story takes one final, absolutely stunning turn. A truth is revealed that changes the meaning of everything he's been through. Okay, so picture this. It's his 21st birthday. A letter arrives, all the way from Thailand. It carries the news that his grandfather, the man whose name he now carried, the man who spoke of anchors, he had passed away. But inside that letter was one final message. And that final message, it was breathtaking. Turns out, his grandfather had known about the name mistake the entire time. He understood the pain it caused. The letters he'd been sending over the years, they weren't just stories. He saw them as intentional splinters of his own wisdom. And his final gift wasn't some solid anchor, but a vial of sea glass, beautiful broken pieces from his own life, tumbled smooth by the ocean. The legacy wasn't a single anchor. It was a mosaic of reforged pieces.
So in the end, this was never a story about a boy who was broken by a clerical error. Not at all. It was about a grandfather who intentionally dispatched pieces of himself, his legacy, across an entire ocean, trusting that his grandson would find a way to reassemble them into something new and beautiful.
And that really leaves us with this final thought. Maybe a name isn't some fixed anchor meant to hold us in one place. Maybe our true identity is more like a mosaic, something we have to actively build ourselves from all the sharp, beautiful, and broken pieces that life and our ancestors hand to us.